Hi, Susie.
Hey, Becky. How you doing?
Good. Hi, Jim.
There. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Oh, good, good. Well, good evening to you both.
yeah.
Good evening. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Becky. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Becky, the power went out, when the big windstorm, the power went out at the town hall for about 4 minutes. Is that correct? And, when we had the big windstorm that, shut down, West Pelham Road.
It's
That
generated.
happened at 2 a.m. I don't know.
Okay, I was just wondering because I was just trying technically to figure out why the town hall would have gone down and the generators, of course, had to come back up. And why we didn't have any problem during that windstorm. It's because of the new three-phase lines. It's just this issue that was circulating in my brain. For what it's
Yeah,
worth.
and where did you see it was exactly 4 minutes?
Well, because we, when the generator has to, come on
took
and,
that-
and
yeah.
I get an email notification, when it comes on, especially due to non sort of important situations when it's forced to do so because the power has failed.
Ah, yeah. No, I think sometimes it takes a little while for the cycle to kick in, but and usually it's pretty quick.
Okay.
So I don't know if it had to try a couple times or something. I don't know. I wasn't aware of that issue.
No. And Gail Huntress is here.
Hi, Gail.
Gail. Hi, Gail.
Hello, everyone.
So I'll call the FinCon to order, although I'd like to give April maybe a minute or two to hop on. I think she said she might be a little bit late tonight, but and we don't have Jim Walton tonight. He's traveling. He might hop on during a layover, but otherwise he's not going to be able to join. Let's see. Are we waiting on anybody else? 1, 2, 3.
You have 5.
Yep,
We're
that's
all
it.
set.
Okay.
Doing flashcards, that was a tough test, AJ.
All right. Well, maybe we should get started because we do have kind of a lot to get through tonight, and I've got Ellen on hold here. I was going to try to get through broadband in maybe 15 or 20 minutes if we can, but we'll see, and then we'll dive into the capital planning update on projects that were approved, and then we'll go from there. So thanks for joining us, Gail. I'm gonna share the budget that for the MLP that Jim Hemingway shared with the committee, and maybe you could just kind of walk us through what we're looking at here.
You got it. All right, so we'll just start at the top there with line 5 and routine maintenance. The important things to notice and what I'm going to talk about today are anything that's in a different color, because that's either an unknown item or something that's changed that should probably be noted. And the other important takeaway is that although our budget has gone up by just a tiny bit, 0.65%, it's due to a couple of other revenue sources that are coming in. So Luckily, we're just about flat, even though we have increases in things like just about every budget you've probably been looking at yet this year.
Mhm.
So line 5 there, our annual maintenance, we're bumping that up by $10,000 from 60 to 70,000. And we're also doing that because the cost of materials is going up. We don't have to pay more for labor because we're on a 3-year contract. But our insurance deductible has been raised from $10,000 to $15,000. And also the premiums have gone up. So that increase in the routine network maintenance will help cover any extra gaps we have there. Backhaul is flat, no changes there. The MLP salary and employment overhead, to be determined. I assume it's going to be somewhere between 1.5 and 3%, depending on COLA increases. Bond fee, pole rental, Calyx essential support, supplies and legal, all flat. Our electronics hut operations also flat. I should also mention, if you compare this year's budget to last year's budget, you'll notice there's less line items. And that's because at the advice of Gail Weiss, we've tried to condense some items together because it just makes accounting simpler. So for example, we had electronics hut operations as a item, and then also electronics hut utilities as a different item. There's no reason for those to be separate. So anyway, that's just if you compare something to last year and you're wondering where a line item went, it's because we're combining some things.
So on the right side, in those places, you've already done the work of collapsing those lines that are now in a single line in the FY25 budget.
Right, and for those cells, to try to make it clear, I've written "and" in capital letters.
Got it.
Yep. So the electronics depreciation, same as last year as well. We have a bit over $200,000 by the end of this fiscal year, and eventually the plan for that is to replace everybody's in-home electronics. So the broadband committee continues to discuss that about when the timing is going to be right. It's going to be a pretty major deployment and an expense, so we're considering carefully how and when to do that. Our debt service has reduced a little bit. I'm happy to say that we have about 5 of 10 total payments left. Our last debt payment will be in 2030, so we're getting close. Accounting, treasurer, auditor, and auditor support, those costs have gone up slightly. And again, that's one of our combined items. And let's see. I'm going to talk about lines 19, 20, and 19, 20, 21, and 22 together, because although they're not this, they're all kind of related, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So the subscriber support relates to the fact that there's some federal programs that are ending this year that have provided a subsidy for Shutesbury residents. It's not a lot of people, but enough that we are looking down the road and saying we want to start putting into our budget a way to help low-income households. And so this is a placeholder for us. We're waiting to see what happens with that ACP funding, the Affordable Connectivity Program, that's slated to end in April. The federal government may extend it, but we want to make sure that those low-income households aren't left high and dry when this $30 subsidy ends. So we're planning to cover all or part of that $30 subsidy. So there's a second federal program that offers a subsidy, and that's called Lifeline. And so that's still in place. Federal funding is still flowing to that. There's no end date for that. It seems to be an evergreen federal program, at least for the time being. And in order to administer that program, we have to pay Whip City, so Westfield Gas and Electric, about $3,500 a year. You'll notice our budget item is $7,000, and the reason is because the amount we pay for administration depends on how many people apply. So we have to keep that number higher in case more people apply. And I expect this year we're going to use more of that 7,000 because as ACP starts rolling back, we may get more people applying for the Lifeline. And Lifeline is a lot less. It's only $9.25 reduction. But still, you know, that can help out a household, and it adds up over a year. And that CAF funding, and that stands for Connect America Fund 2 there. This year, we are finally getting the grant payments coming in that we applied to. So if you look at those together, we're going to be gaining $14,730 a year in grant funding up until 2030. And we are paying currently around $3,500 for administration. So we still come out ahead. I'm not sorry that we applied for that grant funding. Like I said, we knew that we would come out ahead. We just didn't know how much. But those funds are expected to flow by probably the beginning of this, like the beginning of the fiscal year we're talking about, 2025. They said it would maybe come through this year, but knowing how quickly things happen in the federal government, I'm not expecting it. Our other source of income that we're expecting in 2025 is some dark fiber rental. So here in Shutesbury, we have a valuable location because we're connected to one of the middle mile networks that's run by a middle mile provider called Crown Castle. Middle mile just means the connection to the fiber internet. And so that connection, we already allow Leverett, the town of Leverett, to use one. It's a mutual agreement because we also use a pathway through their town to get to redundant connection. But New Salem wants to use Crown Castle now, and they need to use our fiber to get there. So they're going to be renting our dark fiber through an indefeasible right of use. It's called an IRU for a period of 20 years. And that is going to become an income stream for us. So we used current market rates in order to figure out that number. It's not a extra expense for us because they're just running on our lines that we are maintaining anyway. But still, we want to charge something. It is a valuable asset. And we have plenty of fiber left if other towns or companies come and say that they want to rent other fibers. We have that capacity to do more rentals there. So the next 3 lines there, you'll see the extra money going into extraordinary and unforeseen in line 24. And our subscriber fees are staying the same. Those will not be going up. Yeah, that is, let me just see. I think that's all I had to say. I'd be glad to field questions.
Thanks, Gail. Let's see. Any questions, Bob?
Yeah, Gail, hi, Bob Groves. Just
Hi.
curious, you mentioned online, I think it's 20, that there's grant money, that $7,000 is the administrative fee that you're taking as an expense? Is that what it is?
That is correct.
So out of the 14,000, basically half of it has to go to administrative fee. Who gets that fee?
Yeah, great. Yeah, great question. So it's a little bit of a convoluted story. So way back around 2017, Whip City, so Westfield Gas and Electric, when we were initially working with them to design and help build our network, they applied for something called a census block to get this federal grant. It's enormous. It's millions and millions of dollars to serve the unserved. This is in addition to what the state was offering. And so we said, great, we're already a part of this. Sign us up in your census block. And so they did, and they did an enormous amount of grant writing to get these millions of dollars, and then it was distributed kind of proportionally amongst the towns that applied. Shutesbury got one of the smaller amounts, just because of the kind of census block that we were in, our population density. I think it was also based on some of the state money we got, but don't quote me on that. And so now here we are all these years later. The build outs in all these other towns are done. The census block has been approved by the federal government saying, okay, you followed through on your grant, you're serving us, here is your millions and millions of dollars, and the money's going to start flowing. Now here's the catch is, we decided not to use eventually Whip City as our internet service provider. We left them. We didn't want them to administer our build out. We departed and hired our own project manager to do it from Holyoke Gas and Electric instead. And we did that because they weren't moving fast enough and we couldn't wait. And so we left, and so we still have to pay them for the work that they did initially to win that grant, and the administration to maintain a website and to manage those applications from low-income folks. So that is a very long story to say, why are we paying? And we have to pay them. They're the grant winners and the grant administrators. If we chose them on our ISP, we would not have to pay that $7,000, but you would be paying $15 a month more for your services, and so would everyone else in town. And if you do out the math, the $7,000 is much, much less.
Thank you. I can do that math in my head, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. The $7,000 is a bargain.
Thank you.
All right. I had a quick question, Gail. I was wondering if you could give us an idea of how many households have accessed this, either, I guess, what is it, the ACP or Lifeline, like those subsidies that are available to low-income families. I would just be curious about kind of what the scale of, the Shutesbury population that is accessing those funds.
Yeah. So currently we have 21 households who receive that $30 a month ACP benefit, and 8 of those also get Lifeline. So let's just call it another $10 off. Plus another 4 households beyond that get just Lifeline. Okay, so 25 total, 21 of those are getting ACP.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, don't think I see any other questions. So just want to thank you, Gail, for everything you do and for the very clear presentation today and walking us through this budget. That was super informative.
You're so welcome, and thank you for all that you do. I know that you are reaching the end of committee budget meetings, and you all deserve a big part of your night off. It's a huge job.
All right, thanks.
All right, if anyone
Okay.
thinks of any questions afterwards, broadband@shutesbury.org, and thanks again.
All right, appreciate it, Gail.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. Ellen, thanks for joining us. So I think what we're going to do now is shift gears and talk about the various projects that have gone through the capital planning process this year. And just for everybody's sort of information, the capital planning committee, which Bob and I serve on, met on February 28th to review all of the different proposals and have kind of voted on whether to recommend moving forward on with each of these. And so, Ellen, do you want to how would you like to do this? Do you want to walk us through the projects, or would you like, I have a list, I could do that also, however you want to handle this.
I don't care. I can walk you through much of them. I don't have a lot of the detail, because
Okay.
some of them are real complicated, but we can start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
First of all, I can't tell you how pleased I am to deal with the department heads we currently have, because they have been really good in spending their time contacting, vendors and everything else to get us the information we needed. It was really, it's very much appreciated, considering, they're all so busy anyway, and then they have to add our stuff to their stuff, which we definitely appreciate. Well, let's start with the police, because she was the first one who had everything in. So first of all, they are asking for another cruiser, except this time they're asking for a pickup truck. And it may sound kind of silly, and I asked her why in the hall the other day. And she explained to me that regular cruisers are made primarily for chasing people, and we don't do that. But what we do is we have dirt roads, and regular cruisers are really not made for dirt roads. So that's one reason why she's requesting the, I believe it's an F-150 responder. And the cost is $70,588 with the state contract. And that includes everything.
Ellen, how much was that again?
$70,588. That's what the state bid is.
Thank you.
Now, in addition to this, she came to us because I don't know if you've noticed, but the police are no longer wearing their body cameras because, frankly, they can never tell when they're going to die. They are 6 years old, which is old for that kind of equipment. And as a result, she's in a position where she doesn't dare have them wear them, because then if they die at a critical moment, it looks like they shut them off. And that would be a huge negative brouhaha. She was smart enough, though, to find a grant for us. And the grant is going to pay for half of the cost of the body cameras. And actually, she's getting 6 of them because that's the amount that she can get at the given amount. And that was the amount the grant would cover. Because she found a different company, not the one she's currently using, because frankly, she's been very dissatisfied with their action on repair or helping with problems with it. So she contacted all of her police chief friends, and she found another company called Axon Enterprises, which she is looking to go with. They are out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And the total cost for the 6 body cameras and all the other equipment that goes with it, without the grant, was $23,544. Oh, no, I'm sorry, $22,736, because they think they're going to charge us tax. And we know they're not going to charge us tax. So then the grant gives us half of it. So the net sum of what we would have to pay is $11,368. And that would be in one lump sum. I mean, there are provisions to pay yearly, but why? I mean, why hang us up with that kind of detail? I mean, $11,000 for a $22,000 piece of equipment is well worth it. And she's to be congratulated for finding this. It's a small town grant. And actually, it's tribal, which was interesting. There's a word tribe in the middle of the name of the grant. But they approved us, and we've got the money. So that was the second thing. So those are the only 2 from the police department. Fire department did not put in anything. Now, for the highway, as you probably know, or may know, the highway department is desperately in need of a storage unit to put their stuff in, their equipment in. Small equipment and the stuff they use by hand, because frankly, apparently there's absolutely no room for it now. And the storage unit that they're looking at may cost up to $4,500. They are really not sure. We're saying up to because we don't know exactly what it will be. But on top of this, he's also asking for a generator. They are the only major department or building that does not have a generator. They have a small thing, but nowhere near what they need to, keep the building alive in, like when we lost power for the other day for 10 hours. Now, because we're asking for a generator, they also need to rewire the building. They need a brand new junction box, fuse box, whatever you want to call it, and to redo it, because this is a building that has not been properly electrified in years. Underline the word years. So the combined cost of the generator and the new electric system is going to be up to $25,000. Lastly, and I know you know about this one because it was discussed in your meeting and brought to our meeting. Whoops. Okay. Well, hopefully Bob will pick it up. As you know, we have gravel roads. And what I didn't know until Steve came and talked to us, and I'm sure you may not know until he talked to you, was the need to re-gravel them, that they've been, what do I want to say, taken down to their bare bones over the years. So we are contributing $12,000 to that attempt. He usually budgets 28. And so he's going to basically take it up to 40, and therefore we will have some money to be able to buy the gravel, which is incredibly expensive, in order to do the work that's needed to keep our roads. Okay. Nextly, and you're probably aware of this one too, maybe not the amount. You know, the school is desperately in need of repainting and in many cases re-siding, because things are basically rotting underneath. So we hired a company to take a look at exactly how bad it was. And they came back with a quote that it will cost us about $163,460. 163,460. Now, mind you, there's already, as Becky has told us, and I'm sure she's probably told you, there is money left from the roofing project that we can then spin over to this. So it's not going to cost, in terms of an appropriation, that much money. Okay, that's highway. School, and the last thing is the building committee. Does the building, I imagine the building committee comes to you for budget, or don't they? I don't even know if they have a budget besides what we're going to approve.
They don't. I mean, we have a line item in the budget for,
Okay,
for
because they have spent, ever since this new committee took over and they were repurposed, they have spent an incredible amount of time looking at every single building in detail. They have this huge spreadsheet of everything, pluses and minuses in the buildings. Unfortunately, there are many times more minuses than pluses, because just like the highway barn, we have not been very good at keeping up on the maintenance of all the buildings. So they're asking for a flat budget of $40,000 to be used wherever it is most needed. So that maybe in the town hall, it's going to be in pieces. So, the town hall may have an emergency, or the library may have an emergency, or the old town hall may. You never know what's going to happen. And then they're also going to find, as I say, some of those issues that are critical. And they showed us what they had done to date, which didn't even cover all of the buildings. And there were a fair number of things that were critical. So they're asking for $40,000 for that. And that is, we have approved all of these requests.
Thanks, Ellen.
You're welcome.
So just a couple of things, just add to that. So the capital planning committee took votes on all of these projects every one of them was approved unanimously. On a couple of the projects, and I just, while you were talking, I just went to the notes, the minutes, just to double check. We actually voted on an amount that was slightly different from what you just relayed.
Okay.
Because on the police projects, you gave the specific numbers that came from estimates that Kristen received. So the vote we took on the police cruiser was for an amount up to $70,000. Now,
Oh, thank
we
you.
made, since the quote that you referred to was a slightly different number, and that was actually a little bit higher than $70,000. We might want to adjust it to the number you cited when we get to the stage of thinking about how we would propose to fund these different projects. But I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
And then on the body cams project, we voted to approve an expenditure up to $12,000 to cover the town's costs for that body cam package. So,
Yeah,
so just
right.
go.
The truck quote was exactly what came through from MSQ or whatever it's called. That's where I got that.
Yeah,
And I just did the math on the other one, 50% of that, but it's probably a good idea to we put a little bit extra in.
yeah. I think in retrospect, it was probably a mistake for us to do on the police cruiser to just vote on an up to $70,000 since the quote was slightly more than that. But nevertheless, it's just a small amount. Okay, and then the only other sort of note that, well, there are two notes I had when I was reviewing mine, that just to add to what you shared, is that the police department currently has 4 vehicles in rotation, and this new cruiser would be sort of part of a plan for the department to reduce its fleet from 4 to 3 vehicles. Okay, and then on the school painting and exterior repairs project, that was an estimate that that $163,460, that was the estimated cost that an engineer came up with as part of a kind of a preliminary engineer's report on the project. And so that would obviously go out to bid, and potentially, we would we would see bids that fall under that amount, and that would be nice if that happened. Right. And if that's the case, obviously we'll adjust that number by the time it gets to annual town meeting, and we'll use the number that's specified in the winning bid. And then I think there was some hope that the project that the bid will fall under the 150K mark, because that would have some implications in terms of we wouldn't need to utilize a specific set of certified vendors. I believe.
AJ,
Yeah, go ahead.
Becky's trying to reach you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I just
go ahead.
wanted one of the big points about that is the 163, I'm sorry,
Oh, careful.
includes the 10% contingency. So the actual bid is 140, estimate is 148,640, I think.
Yeah.
And yes, the hope is the actual bids will also come in under 150, because that's the DCAM certification mark, which
Right.
limits the vendors that can apply.
Right. And I think what you explained, or somebody explained to me, Becky, is that as long as the estimate falls under the $150,000, we don't need to utilize the DCAM certified vendors, but the allocation at town meeting if we add a 10% contingency or whatever it is, and that contingency takes
that's
it over
fine.
the 150K mark, then we're still okay, right?
Yes, yes.
Did I understand that correctly? Okay, great. Jim Hemingway, I see your hands up. Do you have, do you want to?
Yes, I have several questions.
Okay,
You mentioned that the pickup truck is going to cost 73,000. What's the comparison between that and just buying another cruiser? Is it roughly the same or more or less or?
I don't have that.
I don't know.
answer.
I don't either. I mean, I know that the cruisers are now over 60.
Okay,
It's very expensive these days. And
Oh.
it's not that as much it is the wear and tear on a vehicle because, you know how it is to drive the dirt roads. Most of us do it all the time. And, by getting a truck, they feel as though it will be more advantageous and enable them to carry other things that they can't carry in their cruisers.
Yeah, I think I can answer that question. I can at least suggest an answer. That
Sure,
is
Bob.
that Kristen did actually submit the price of the
Yeah.
cruisers. We can look that up in our notes from her submissions to us originally. So we have those numbers. She had gotten those estimates. So she said that she wanted the truck because it was more rugged and
Mhm.
I understand that, but I just want to make a point about that because in my opinion, the last chief we had did not properly maintain his vehicles. And so might as well just say that. I think Kristen is committed to doing a better job. That's going to go a long way to getting better durability out of our equipment if it's properly maintained. If she does what she says she's going to do, which I trust she will, then it's not about dirt roads. We all drive on dirt roads, as you said, Ellen, but you have to maintain, you have to actually change the oil, you have to grease up the grease fittings and all the rest. That stuff wasn't being done as far as I could tell. And that was part of the reason why there was an accumulation of repairs that became quite extraordinary on the vehicle that's being replaced. So that's one point. And, that's, I think, an important one to mention. So we do have the numbers on that. We can come up with those before we discuss this
Okay.
particular article. So I'll see if I can find them, and I know we have them somewhere.
and I have a second
Great.
question.
Please go ahead, Jim.
Can you separate out the cost of rewiring the highway garage versus the cost of the generator? The reason why I ask is that thanks to the three-phase installation that runs right by the garage, the power that comes from Pratt Corner Road to the to the garage is now a lot more reliable than it ever was before because of this huge investment that National Grid, well, actually National Grid didn't do it. They got infrastructure money to put in that three-phase line. But I just questioned the need for the generator. But I was wondering what the difference was between rewiring and the generator, if that's possible, the cost of the generator.
Again, I think my recollection is, I have a recollection on that. I
Mhm.
think he got a quote for a new panel of $3,200. And so that's included in the estimate for the ask, a new panel, because this panel was, I think, only a 100-amp panel. It was loaded up with a lot of those double breakers. It wasn't considered to be, and I'm sure he's correct, it was not safe to add yet another breaker into that panel, squeeze another one. So they're going to put in a new panel with a 200-amp service, and that will accommodate the existing demand and the generator as well. So that was part of the deal. And we also had, I believe, we were at least thinking that we might have had a gas tank, but we didn't get any specific feedback on that. I think people were trying to get in touch with the bidder and with Walter's gas propane, but I don't know if that's included in that number or not. Do you have any recollection?
It's not. No, it's not. And I just checked my notes. So the cost of, I think so the estimate that Steve gave us was $22,295, which included $3,800 for the new electrical panel. So that was the
380, yes, 380.
cost for the panel, and that did not include the purchase of. No, actually, sorry. There was some confusion about whether it included the propane tank or not, and Steve was gonna get some clarification about that.
Right.
Well, putting in 200 amp service is certainly an important upgrade and improvement. I just question the need for the generator because of how reliable the power is and there now, and also it just, well, if Becky, or you had something to say?
Oh, I was just hit me. The power just went off last week. So
Yes.
Mhm.
We lose power all the
it
time.
hasn't created a situation where it's more reliable. It might be more reliable, but we still have power outages.
Well, of course, I mean, power outages are, happen everywhere. Although I might add, in this last calamity that hit, with the high winds, we never lost power down here by the lake. So part of that three-phase line was definitely working all the time. So I don't know. I just and also, the folks in the garage aren't there all the time. I just like to know how much the generator is, extra is going to cost us. That's all. Because I question whether it's necessary.
Got it.
It's just,
All right. So hopefully, so you got that info, right? That $3,800 was for the panel, the rest was for the generator.
yeah. Yeah, that's needed. I can, if you're running welding equipment and things like that, you definitely need something much stiffer than a 100 amp panel.
Jim, did you have other questions that?
No, those
or
two.
Okay. I see George, and then we'll go to Susie.
A few questions. I think Bob's point about maintenance of the fleet is always important. It's true for all our equipment in town, but I think now that we're going to, we have a plan to go to 3 cruisers. That's encouraging to hear. I was wondering if Kristen had considered, or if there was an option for an electric pickup truck, an EV instead of gas powered. And is the capital planning committee, maybe you're not involved, but is there a movement or a consideration of moving all our smaller vehicles to electric?
I can answer
So
that,
I
part of that, George, if you don't mind, AJ. Kristen
Go
made
ahead.
an indication to us that she had heard through other
Mhm.
chiefs, other departments, that hybrid cruisers were not working out, and they were having lots of problems, difficulties, downtime, expensive repairs, and so forth. So she was persuaded to not go to that route, even though she originally was inclined to do so. She actually did last year when she came to us, when we did not recommend her request. She did come with a request for that vehicle. She had done her homework on it, but she changed her mind on that one, and so that was part of her reasoning, was that they have a bad reputation.
Yeah, we just got to give it more time.
Okay, Susie.
I think Becky has an
and then-
answer. Oh, I'm not done. I have another question, but I think Becky wants to
Okay, sorry.
address this.
Just a little more on the same topic. She did, I'm sorry, am I muted? No. So she did investigate, and we had put in a bid for a hybrid, and we were told it would be a year delay. They had a recall of thousands of the cruisers. And so given that kind of situation, she ended up, last time the purchase of the cruiser was not a hybrid or electric. So hopefully the reliability develops soon.
And my other question was, how much money is left over from the school roof that we can apply towards this exterior repair and painting?
We have 137,600.
Wow. So you're telling me we only need $26,000 for.
Yeah. And that number could be, it depends on the bid, but we're going out, the bid is going out this week. We'll have that information well ahead of town meeting.
Well, that changes everything. Okay, that's great. I do have one other question too. The town buildings for $40,000, Becky,
Yes.
that's already in the operating budget, right?
No,
No,
And the last operating budget schedule, I thought it was on it.
No, so there,
Oh.
so George.
yes, you're right, it's in the budget, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, we're looking at it here. is, as a capital expenditure, but we've got it in the budget. So we just need to, talk about that when we're doing the operating budget. I don't know, or now. Just something to keep in mind when we converse about how to fund these things.
You know, we should double check that.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, Susie?
Two things. When there is a storm, the highway department often is part of dealing with it, and so they often have to come into the highway. So if they don't have any power, that makes some of their work and communications more difficult. So when there's a storm, it's kind of all hands on deck, and it would be good for them to have a generator backup for that. And then I know that post re-roofing the school, there's been a couple of issues about gutters and some initial times where it leaked. So I wondered if any more money is needed to back up the school roof.
Susie, answering your second, is that okay, AJ? I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
The school roof gutter, the gutter situation is a warranty issue. The architect is working with the construction company and coming up with a solution for the defects that have occurred. So at this point, there should not be any monetary impact. I'm sorry, and your other question was?
No, the other one was just a statement that when there's a storm, the highway department is called into action just like everybody else. Well, not me, but everybody else.
Thank you.
Ellen?
I was going to say that one of the things Kristen told us, she of course checked with some of the neighboring communities that do have electric cruisers. And one in particular, it was a nightmare. It's been in the shop more than it's been out, because they're apparently not at the stage of being able to be used as police people use them. So, we've got to make sure that what we get is something that we can have on hand and that won't be in the shop all the time.
Well, especially when we have a fleet of 3 vehicles.
Yes.
Hmm.
We don't have a lot.
Okay,
I
Bob?
could use a few.
Yeah, so is this the night when we should we be discussing this now, or is this something we discuss when we do this on the budget? Because I have some things to say, but I could wait if that's the proper thing.
I think right now we should, utilize Ellen's time for kind of clarification kinds of questions. And then I think we can let her relieve her and have our discussion.
Okay, so I'll hold off.
All right, any other questions for Ellen? I don't see any hands up. So Ellen, thank you
Sure.
so much
And-
for
And
taking
thank
time
you
tonight.
to the 2 gentlemen who are on the committee with me and who took better notes than I did, because of course I'm busy running the meeting. So, but anyway, have a great day, and please, everybody, stay healthy.
Thanks, Ellen. Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, Ellen.
Bye, Ellen.
All right, so I think what we could do now is those folks who want to share a sort of a comment or kind of raise questions or share any feedback about what they heard from capital planning. I think we could take those now. Some of you may, this won't be your last opportunity to provide that feedback. You might want to, spend a little time thinking about it. But yeah, if there's anybody that wants to share some feedback now, why don't we hear from you? So Bob, if you wanted to.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I want to make a general comment. Hope it's not too long, but I was the chair of the building committee for a long time, and we did spend a lot of time on the school because, of course, we all know, everybody knows about the school roof and all the difficulties we had with that. And so I'm familiar with the school, and we always planned on the building committee to address the trim and the siding before the paint job after the roof was completed, which is exactly how it's being approached now in terms of chronology. But, you know, when I looked at the building, I could see many of the things that have been pointed out by the present building committee. You know, rotten corner boards, cracked corner boards from mowers, some bad siding, some drainage issues, other things. The cornices, of course, were kind of a mess. Some of that has been addressed as part of the roof job, but part of it will be addressed in this phase. However, you know, this job, the way it's been done, I want to be very critical of it because I consider it to be extremely unnecessarily expensive to hire an engineer to spec this out. These are carpentry repairs. Any decent builder, carpenter, contractor could have specified these repairs. We paid an engineer something, I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head, but some tens of thousands of dollars to specify it. And when he specified it, he came back with a list of specifications. He just had a bunch of copper, what's it called? Just regular documents to stored in his computer that he filled in the blanks. And it looked very official, very engineering-like, very sophisticated. But it really is just a list of the things that need to be replaced. And the building committee looked at it, they went around the site, and they decided, rightfully, that there was twice as many repairs stipulated by the engineer than they thought were necessary. They were still erring on the side of replacing things that were dubious, but they cut it in half. They reduced the amount of the specs considerably. So there goes the engineer's value right there, as far as I'm concerned. That says it all. But we're paying them a lot of money, and they're going to run the job. The building committee that I was on, we would have done the specifications. We would have asked common bidders to come in and make their own judgments about that same work and to specify it and to be sure that we had every wall photographed if necessary and then stipulated what had to be done or what had to be. This is very expensive to have professional engineers not only specify the job, but to run the job, to ensure the job, and it becomes a professional job when it could have been done by local builders and it could have been done for something way under the numbers of dollars we're talking about now. And I find that really a bad trend. And, you know, again, we all know the big disputes that some of us had, myself and Becky particularly, about the sidewalks and the boilers and other issues at the school. What I was trying to do is what I would do if I was on the building committee today, which unfortunately has been dissolved and then reconstituted so that with the new, and I'm not criticizing them, they're doing it a different way, but we shouldn't be spending this much money. That's all there is. It's very simple. And that's a carpentry job. It doesn't require an engineer. It's that simple. So I'm upset about that. I absolutely support maintaining the school and keeping it in good condition and getting it painted. But not at this is not necessary to spend this kind of dough. It's something that's not engineering. It is just carpentry.
So to be clear, Bob, your criticism is about the part of this project that was strictly the kind of the engineering contract that produced the bid and is going to manage the project. Because you voted to support the actual painting and exterior repairs, right? So
Yes,
I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. Yeah.
Yes, I did. I voted with the rest of the committee to support the project, to support the repairs to the school. But as I pointed out at that meeting, I don't really approve of the way this has been done and the unnecessary expense that's been brought to the town and to the taxpayer. And I also pointed out when the building committee met us, I think when they met the capital planning committee, that is, I asked them if they had a policy about hiring local talent. And they said, somebody made a remark to the effect of, why would we want to hire some local slob when we can get some competent person from the state bidding list or something? And, you know, that to me is completely anathema to what our values were on the committee and what I think the town would like to see done, supporting local people. What goes around comes around, number one. Number two, local people tend to be more responsive than outsiders. So, you know, I'm a little bit disappointed about that too. So I think that this job, if it comes in under 150, as Becky points out, it doesn't have to go through the elaborate sort of hoops that a DCAM contractor would have to be brought in. That's good. I hope that they'll bring in, that they'll open up the bidding and encourage people, local people, to bid on it. I know people are hard to get, but this is not a complicated job. It really is not. And by the
All
way,
right.
the original job was crap. I mean, whoever, the original architect and the original engineer that did the school did a crummy job with the details of the siding and the trim. Awful. They didn't, and so there's engineering and architectural design right there. It'd be very easy to improve on the details when this work is done. But this was an architect design and engineered job, and it was done in a crappy way. And they didn't even do the site drainage in a reasonable way. The building is way too low to the ground, and that's responsible for a lot of the problems they have over there.
Okay, let me move on to Susie.
Muted.
I don't know if Becky has a point that she wanted to put in there.
Becky's your hand up to respond
No,
to.
no, I just wanted to address the quote. I didn't get it all, Bob. It had something to do, you quoted, the building committee is saying, we wouldn't hire some local slob. That was not the quote. The response that was made by Jeff Quackenbush was, let's see if I get it right. We're happy to hire local people, but not at the expense of quality. That's all he said. And I don't think that is a reason for anger. They did say they don't have the same policy as you do. And they said they don't restrict from hiring locals, but they will not sacrifice quality. That's all they said. So your interpretation and your anger, I'm not sure where it is coming from.
You're muted,
All right,
Bob.
Susie.
Briefly, I'll just say I wasn't referring to what Jeff said. I was referring to what a woman on the committee, I can't remember her name, sorry, said, and she said something disparaging about local people and also about how engineers, and so that really offended me because I'm a local person myself and I'm in the trades. And we actually had a very, very, as you know, Becky, we had a very, very conscious policy to try to encourage local people to bid on our jobs. We had some terrible luck with some out of town contractors, really did. And you remember that. We had some real headaches.
Mixed bag.
All right, so I was at the meeting. I don't remember the exact quote, but my takeaway from it was that they would not kind of award like special consideration or give an advantage to a local bidder, but that if you know if a local bidder was the best fit for the project and could do it at the highest quality, they were happy to do that. But that they I don't think they were inclined to kind of award special consideration or special points. I mean that's certainly not the quote, but it was kind of at least my takeaway from that conversation. Susie and then George.
I think having a path of an engineer and the kind of contract that was awarded to the roof allows us to go back when there's a problem and address it with professional pieces in place. We got this engineering recommendation. They worked with the builder, and now in the case of the gutters, it's being readdressed. And I think if you don't have some of those steps, it's harder for a small committee of volunteers to effectively readdress problems. So there's a somewhat paying now or paying later. And I think that's a reason that we need some expertise. I'm not saying it all works, and I'm not saying it all doesn't work when you don't have it, but that's part of the path. And that's actually part of the path that the state sort of pushes, that it wants, you know, at certain expenses, they need a DCAM certified person. So there's a sense that there's a level of expertise needed. Sometimes it's a requirement, sometimes it's just prudent. And the other thing is I don't know what the engineering costs were for this estimate and for them to follow through.
I'm sorry, I don't have the exact answer. That number changed, was reduced in a couple times, so I can get that for you.
And I'll just add that, you know, there were three deliverables that were shared with the capital planning committee. One was, a draft bid package, so which has presumably sounds like it already went out to bidders now. So they produced the bid package, and then like a series of architectural drawings that were going to be shared as part of that package, and then a kind of a summary project letter. So if folks want to see any of those documents, I'm sure they can be shared. George.
Yeah, the conversation about local bidders, I think the majority of everyone in our community knows that, all things being equal, we would always go with the local contractor. There's a host of reasons why we would do that. But my question is, do we get a choice on who we pick? Don't we have to go with the lowest bidder?
Yes,
If they're all qualified, we have to go with the lowest bidder regardless of location,
yes,
their location.
yes.
Okay.
That seems like an important clarification. Okay. Any other questions or I'm not, but sort of feedback or comments before we move on? Bob?
Yeah, I just want to make another clarification on that subject. If our policy was to encourage local people to bid and to design the job so that it would be doable by a local person rather than by a big corporate commercial contractor. And so, not that we could control that. However, we, the select board and the building committee, can make a recommendation to accept or to deny a bid, even if it's the lowest bid, if we don't think that that particular company is qualified or is a good reputation. We've been through this process enough to know that sometimes we say to this guy ain't going to work for us again. And even if his bid is low, we're not going to recommend, and the select board would probably agree, if the person has a bad track record, to not take them on. So there are exceptions to the low bid idea. That it's there to prevent corruption, but and then nobody would promote corruption. But you do want to try to get the local people involved to the degrees that you can within the law and within the ethics of the law. So that's just a small clarification there.
Okay. April?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I wanted to echo what Ellen said, that just reviewing what's being proposed, it does seem like our department heads really were diligent and looking at what is needed in light of what, budgetary constraints. And also with the school repairs, it's going to cost us close to like $10,000, which is a relief. And I don't see anything excessive in what's been proposed by our department heads. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, I would say also, just kind of to your point, that what I've noticed is that I think across the board, there seems to be a very serious commitment to maintaining our equipment and projects equipment across different departments. That there seems, I've just noticed that there's as we've met with various department heads, that there's been, I think, particular attention being paid to making sure that when we invest in equipment, that is taken care of, and that in the long run that ends up kind of benefiting the town financially as well, because we avoid this kinds of expensive repairs that could have been prevented, if vehicles and other equipment were maintained more properly. George.
I just want to point out, I wrote down all the numbers, and we're looking at requests of $326,000 for all the items noted, but with the funding that we were told about, it comes out to about 190, a little less than 190. So that's what we're going to be trying to finance. So I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to look at and have that conversation about how we finance?
George, are you taking the $40,000 from the building committee out of that?
I'm including the 40 right now in this
Because that's
number,
already in
so
our budget.
it is, so we have to decide what to do, but because Ellen had listed it, I included it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we could take it out, then it would be
Take it out.
150.
That's what I got, 150, 149, something, yes,
Yeah, 149, exactly, yeah,
316.
thank you. Let me check.
You're welcome.
Wait, let me check. No, it's all right.
Is this
Anyway.
time to talk about that? Is
148.
this going to be a yearly budget item aligned in the budget? 40,000, is that the plan, right? I think
I don't
Becky's,
know.
she
Yeah,
froze.
I don't know. Becky, are you
She's
you able to hear
frozen.
us?
No, she's froze.
Uh-oh.
Becky, come
Maybe
back.
blink. Nope.
Bob, I
So
don't,
the question is, should this be funded from capital planning in the first place? Or should the, maybe this year, or how's this gonna work?
It
When
might
do
be
we
too
decide?
early to figure out whether this is annual or not annual. We
Yeah.
might come to that when we realize what their list is and how it's working. But I think we could address this year as this year for now.
yeah, I think that's the right way to go. And it was
Capital
certainly
planning?
not. It was not presented to capital planning as an annual ask, I don't think.
Right.
It was just, this is kind of where, so they shared with us this pretty comprehensive spreadsheet that like details for every building, kind of what equipment and what systems are in place and what kinds of maintenance and issues are, and they kind of classified them according to their
Urgency.
level of urgency. And so I think my sense is that this is just kind of where, like, they've gone through this process, it wasn't complete, but a number of buildings have been reviewed by their team and kind of cataloged in this way, and this is kind of their preliminary ask corresponding to kind of a set of projects that they think are going to be kind of among the higher priority ones.
So
All
what you're
right.
suggesting then is that this should be a capital expenditure and not be part of our budget expense line. Would that change that?
That's my inclination for this year, but obviously, I mean, we should.
Because that would take some of the
we should-
pressure off the 6.21% that's in there now, which is a big percentage of growth in our ask of the taxpayers.
Yeah, that's my instinct is to treat it as kind of a one-time, like a capital expenditure for FY25, and we'll see what's required in the future. That is those, we don't know what that's going to be. So
One point I'd like to make is, it seems ridiculous that we do it this year and we're not going to need that in the future, given all our buildings. But if that's the case, then we won't put in the operating budget. But if we were to need to put it in the operating budget, I think what we would probably want to do is fund portions of it with cash anyways in the beginning and build up. Maybe, if it's 40,000, maybe use 30,000 of free cash, 20,000, 10 and 0 in the subsequent years. Build it slowly into the budget if that turns out that what we need to do. But for now, yeah, this is great. We can use free cash. And as Bob said, we take $40,000 out of the expense increase for the year. That's awesome.
yeah. So let me ask a question. I mean, we could theoretically, I could pull up. I have George's CapEx funding analysis spreadsheet that he's put together. I've added the projects that we discussed tonight, and we could, actually start to have a discussion about how we would fund these projects. I think I initially thought we would maybe tackle that at the next meeting, but it's only 7:30, and if folks are prepared to start that discussion now, I can pull it up and we can start to talk about how we might want to fund how we might recommend funding some of these. Susie?
This is sort of getting to the place where there's lots of different angles that we can be looking at. There are places in the operating budget that I would suggest looking at funding slightly differently. And some of those would be out of free cash. So we could go down the road of clarifying this group of capital projects with free cash, but I do think there's some other things to think about. One of them is whether part of the school budget that's for out of district placement might be seen as a free cash expenditure. I also think that there's a way to rationalize the rural aid to be bumped up in the school budget and to discuss it with them. Because when George and I talked to Aaron Saunders, he viewed the fact that our Chapter 70 money is flat is true and difficult, but it's also that the state's attitude is that they are surgically targeting some of the revenue to compensate in different categories, and one of them is rural aid. And so rural aid went from 40, and they're counting on 60, but it went up to 86. So I can see sort of moving the revenue pieces around as we get towards our finish line, and whether we do just the capital projects tonight, but with an eye that some other expenses that are in the operating budget might come out of free cash or might be reduced by other revenue sources.
Okay, George?
I would echo what Susie's saying, but from a different angle. We need to look at when we're looking at the capital projects and how we're going to fund them, we also need to look beyond FY25. And by looking at the operating budget first, we're going to see the debt service for this year and how much we can fund stabilization with, and that's going to be a part of the equation. Also, AJ, on the capital spreadsheet that I sent you, we have to have a line for how much of the operating budget we might fund with free cash, so we can account for that in there. I think you know that, and you probably put it in. So I think it is important to look at the operating budget first, is really what I say.
All right. Becky, I see you're back with us. Oh, Bob.
I just want to basically echo what George said. I think that we have to look at these things together, and I think to vote on these requests now without understanding what the budget looks like and how we're going to address some of the issues there might not be the smartest thing. It might be better to do it more or less together once we've reviewed the budget a little more in more detail,
Yeah, understood. All right. So Becky, do you have an updated budget for us to look at, or are we still essentially working with the same numbers that you shared with us at our last meeting?
You're muted.
There haven't been many changes, AJ. I think since our last meeting, we got the regional numbers in before, so it's I haven't made
Okay.
many changes.
All right. So let me pull up then the budget we looked at the last meeting. Let's see. All right, which is labeled draft number 6. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So this is the expense budget that we looked at, that we started to discuss at our last meeting. So yeah, I mean, Susie, it sounds like you had some, at least thoughts that you wanted to share about, it sounded to me like potentially items that we might fund with free cash. Do you want to take this opportunity to share those now, get some feedback?
So we know that an out of district placement is not forever, and we put a lot of money in the FinCom reserve initially that was meant to help cover this. So now I don't know how we should view that, our FinCom reserve. We clearly could spend it all like we did last year, but maybe that was an anomaly. So I didn't know if we should view some of the costs in the school budget to come out of free cash, FinCom reserve, or also recommend that the school count on more revenue from rural aid, because for one thing, it's proposed in the budget to be the same this year. And, you know, I understand dancing with the state as a partner is a risky adventure, but I think we should try to go with suggesting that they have more revenue there that will help meet their budget costs. So those were three different places that we could think of, some from FinCom reserve, some from free cash, and some from just utilizing rural aid, not targeting it for the OOD, just for the whole budget.
I think on that third point, Susie, I'm not sure I'm totally clear. So did you receive some information that the amount of rural aid that the town is going to be awarded is higher than what was included in the school's budget, which I understood was kind of held steady?
Let me, they wrote in rural aid at 60,000.
And that was the same
No,
as FY24?
65,000. Last year, it was 60. Previous year to that was 40. The fact is, they got 86,000 in FY 24. So instead of getting 60, they got 86. In FY 25, they're proposing 65 is their rural aid. But the current discussion that we've had with Aaron and that we hear in the news is that rural aid is the state's response to support certain schools. And we happen to be totally qualified for that aid. So I believe it's reasonable to assume they'll get 86,000 again, and therefore it shouldn't be 65,000 in their budget. It could be 75,000 and still leave some wiggle room. They are anxious about making a commitment like that because the state doesn't always come through again and again. But what we're hearing from our rep is that this is a compensating funding that the state is choosing. So it's not giving all the schools extra Chapter 70 money, but it is using this as a funding stream for rural schools. And you know, there's sort of other places in the budget where the state money is not coming to us in the regular cherry sheet places or the regular school aid places, but it is coming somewhere. And I feel like we should recognize that, and in this case, utilize it.
Understood. Thanks for clarifying that. So I can't recall the sort of history of that rural aid amount that's been awarded to our town, how it's sort of fluctuated from year to year, but has it ever declined from one year to the next, or has it always been a case of it either remaining flat or being increased from one fiscal year to the next? Do you happen to know that?
I don't think it's been around very long, is it, Susie?
You're right,
Is
it's
what?
new.
No,
No,
it's
that's
five,
true.
It's been there for a while.
5 or
Right,
6
but-
years.
Yeah,
It's a recent development historically.
it's
How-
FY 22, it showed up as 30,000.
And do we have any idea how permanent this is or how reliable this is as a source?
Well,
of-
that's what the school is so anxious about, because they don't want to dance with that partner if it's going to walk away. But what we hear, and I think that it's a mentality we haven't had. We always are saying, you know, rats, the state is level funding or not increasing our Chapter 70. And it is true that way. And therefore, one of our main understandings of how the world works is being changed. But the rep is saying that there are state funds that are coming through different paths, and he said rural aid is one of them. And in the news right now, rural aid is being suggested at a continued level. And I'm hearing it because there's a lot of pressure on the state because of all of us who are only getting level chapter 70 money. Where is this gonna, how is this gonna change for us? And this happens to be one of the targeted areas.
Got it. Okay, George?
Well, I wanted to ask Becky, she sent us the information about the MMA the other day, and I'm wondering if she's got her finger on the same pulse from what she's heard there and what she thought about the likelihood of rural aid in the long run and the likelihood of another $86,000 for FY24. That was my first question.
I'll jump in and answer that. Is that okay?
Yeah,
So
please.
what I was going to say was that the state is showing a commitment to the rural aid, the rural communities. Ann Goby, who had been in the Senate, I believe, is now the new Massachusetts Director of Rural Affairs. This is a new position created by our new governor over the summer, which they're trying to really stake out a commitment to addressing rural issues with sensitivity and understanding. Unlike, it's not the same only 495 and to Boston being appreciated as having needs. So they actually have a new position. She's very active. She's very pushy. And I do believe they talked about fighting for more money through the rural aid. There was more activity under the rural aid. The only thing the legislators had to say about Chapter 70 was they really were going to fight hard to get our, $30 a child up to $100 a child and get us an extra, $6,000 a year for a town like ours. So I think rural aid is the place where things are active, but the bigger problem is revenue is dramatically down. The 9C cuts came through, and there still might be more. And so that hopefully, the economically the state has to right its ship too before they can keep addressing our problems.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, hopefully if they were to raise it to $100, which I know there's a lot of pressure, we get a little something also at the region, but yeah, $6,000 versus what we can get. I agree with Susie. Cutting the school budget to the extent that we think they might get more rural aid would be fine by me. In the last meeting, Susie, you actually made a comment about, are there things in the budget we can fund with free cash? You made the comment tonight too, of course. And I found 4 things, right, that are pretty much big jumps from year to year. 12,500 for the dam consultant, 12,000 for gravel road maintenance. I don't know if that's related to what the capital planning just brought to us. 7,000 for striping, and then we're paying an additional 60,000 for the out of place district placement, the 90,000 less the 30 that we're going to get that we're estimating we're going to get from the circuit breaker. And to me, when we have big items, why not ease them into the budget by using free cash to fund portions of them in their first years? So I think this is an opportunity for us to use free cash. I wouldn't suggest that we actually do that at this moment, because I think this is what I was saying earlier, we have to kind of incorporate these into the whole cash conversation when we're looking at capital expenditures. But dam consultant, out of district placement, gravel roads and striping adds up to 91,500. If we took $45,000 or, and applied it to the budget this year, we could be covering 50% of all those. And then next year reevaluate what we need to do. I'd be comfortable using 30,000 a year for the next 4 years for the 50% of the out of placement district, because eventually that will disappear. So just wanted to kind of throw that concept out. Thanks.
Okay, that's helpful. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to, I think thinking some innovative ways for us to reduce the pressure on the taxpayer. That's good. But one point I want to make about Chapter 70 money, and I've made this before, but I'll try to make it. That is that our enrollment is declining, and that's one of the major drivers why our Chapter 70 money is not increasing. And also Chapter 70 has become a statutory method for a progressive agenda from the state to supply more resources to low performing and poor communities, of which we are neither. So that's partly responsible for this situation that we're in. The idea that rural aid is going to offset that's great, but I don't think there's any guarantee that that's going to survive some political winds that might blow it away. So we have to be cautious about that, as Susie pointed out. But the other thing I wanted to bring up was that the proposed budget that we saw last week showed something in excess of 6% increase in the levy, and there's another way to control that. It has to ask departments to take less than what they're projecting for increases in their budget. I haven't heard any conversations about that, but I think that's something we have to look at too. It's to say, you're asking for 10%, and you're going to have to do without that kind of increase and make something work out for you with less support from the taxpayer, because that is another tool we have here in the toolbox, and I think it's important to remember that, and to do our job properly, we have to consider that as an option.
Okay. Susie.
I want to flag George's words that we would, by using more rural aid, we would cut the budget. I think the whole language should be, we would tell them that we feel they could apply more rural aid in their revenue picture so that the impact of the total budget to the town would be less. It doesn't cut any expenses, it meets them.
Yep, that's helpful. So Susie, would you be, I'm not suggesting you do this yet until we had a chance to hear from everybody, but would you be, I mean, this is obviously something we couldn't impose this on the school, right? I mean, this is something we would ask them if they would be comfortable making this adjustment in their budget, right? And so you would be comfortable sort of making that request on
Yeah,
behalf of the FinCom?
I think it's about a presentation of a perspective that comes from some of the interactions I have and have had. And if our committee felt that it would be a reasonable perspective to hold at this time, then that's what I would tell them. And you're right, you can't make them do it. But it's interesting to me how everybody sort of has their lanes. And this was the first year I realized there's revenues that come to us that we don't particularly see. And so rural aid is one of them. It's over there, but it still comes to our whole town. So I want it to be seen as a more useful tool. and I, Aaron Saunders may not be the most reliable source of information here, but I'm seeing it also in terms of the talk about rural communities and this specific way to help rural communities meet some of their education costs, because we have different education costs. That's how it got there. And so that's how rural aid got developed for schools, because there are different costs rural towns face. So I would be willing to talk to them. We would have to come up with what number we all, if we go this route, what we feel is a reasonable one to ask them to consider putting into their budget.
All right. George and April, I see your hands up. Did you have comments or questions about this specific idea of around seeing if this
Yes.
would be willing? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So George and then April.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, certainly the way we approach it with them is not necessarily what I said, but what I'm referring to is really it would be decreasing the amount of money that they would need for our budget. And just to be clear, we do have say. The finance committee recommends a budget to the town. And we can recommend to the town a smaller number than the school brought to us. I'm not arguing that we should. I don't think we should. I think the only decrease I want to make to that budget is to the extent that we think there's more revenue. But I want to be clear, we can. I mean, we need to understand that, and know that about our role. But I mean, we want to work collaboratively with the school, and I certainly always do. We've got a great relationship with them. And so I like the approach that Susie is recommending. And again, it's the same thing with me. Everything I read and everything I see, it looks like there's a lot of pressure on the state to increase. So I think this is going to be very reliable. And this is why I wouldn't want to cut FinCom reserve, because I do think that if it turned out not to be reliable, that, you know, I want to give the school committee an assurance that we might have some money in FinCom reserve for them. I wouldn't necessarily say that to them, but if they start getting really, you know, weak in the knees on this, I would want to be able to have that.
Bob? Oh, sorry, April.
Thank you. I did want to echo support for what Susie is bringing to the table. That the essentially would be asking them to level fund their projections for the rural aid from what fiscal year 24 to 25, because it was $86,000. And I think looking at free cash as a way to help fund this extra expense out of the district, I think is also another way of helping the school out and helping to keep the budget more in control.
Great. And Bob? Bob, are you muted? Yep.
My reading of the newspaper is echoing what Becky was saying. The state is having a revenue shortfall right now, and you know the rural aid that was distributed last year came out of a state fiscal situation, which had a lot of extra money floating around, and that might not be the case this year. So I'm not entirely sure that we're going to be able to count on that as a revenue source, because I think things are tightening up down in Beacon Hill. So I think we should just be mindful of that. And the other thing is the idea of funding the school budget with the finance committee's reserve fund. I mean, how does that work? Doesn't that?
Oh, it's backup. It's just backup. I'm just saying,
well,
if the revenue disappears, they can come to us.
Yeah. If there's an emergency, then we're there to try to plug the.
Yeah, if they're at the end of the year and they're going to come up 10,000 short, we got their back.
Yeah. Okay.
Susie?
Except the finance committee reserve fund used to be much, much lower. And the finance committee of yesteryear decided to bump it up to help cover out of district placements. So that's where that is coming from. I'm not, and then the other thing is, if we do decide to go down this route, and we're wary of state shortfall, maybe instead of 86,000, which is what they got this year, we would pick a different number, maybe 75.
Becky?
I think I'm afraid, I think they did have some more detail on the potential fundings, a new funding source for rural aid. I've been trying to get through those notes and I can't find it right now, but I will search for that and get that to the committee. Because I think they were trying to look for some dedicated funding source that they could rely on moving forward. And so I'll look for that. And I just wanted to, yes, Susie is exactly right. It was probably 20 some years ago that the FinCom added $30,000 to their FinCom reserve, doubling their FinCom reserve. And the purpose was to be able to address sped needs as they came forward. And at that point, I think, yeah, we went from like 25 to 60.
All right, so let me just ask, would, among the committee, is there anybody that would object to the committee directing Susie to go to the school committee and encourage them to account for a larger amount of rural aid revenue in their budget? Does anybody have an objection to us doing that? Okay. All right, I don't see any hands, so I'm assuming, Susie, that that's a thumbs up. Now, you need a number though, so I've heard 86,000, I've heard 75,000. Does anybody have a strong or sort of an opinion about what number we should suggest they use in their budget? I was
Maybe
kind of thinking 80.
Split the difference and make it 80.
How does that strike people? $80,000?
What is it again that they had in their budget this year? 65?
Yeah.
They're in at
65.
65 right now.
So
That's up from last year's, which was 60 projected, but they got 86 last year.
So we'd be asking them to add 15,000. Should we make a motion on this?
Yeah, it's
Vote
probably
on
a
it?
good idea.
Susie's just gonna talk to them.
I know, but I
Okay.
think you have to give them a number and it shouldn't be too scary.
So before we decide, is there any other cuts that, or any other things we can do? I mean, it depends on how desperate we are. I mean, is there anything else that we think we can do here? To cut down on how much excess levy capacity we need to use to balance this budget? I mean, we talked about using $30,000 for the out-of-system district of free cash funding. We're gonna fund the repairs for $40,000 with free cash.
Mhm.
The deficit I had was at 141,000. Becky, is that still the number? It's a round number. The excess levy capacity decrease,
One,
what is that
the
number?
one thing, I'm sorry, I'm not in my office and I don't. have
I
it.
think it's in the
Well-
minutes. Let me look.
Yeah, it's-
Well, AJ can look
Could
at,
you just go to the revenue page, please?
Yeah.
Or
I'll just pull
George,
it up.
whoever put
no,
it up.
it's AJ.
And I
I'll-
can-
I'll pull it up.
144,721.
You're just probably faster.
I'm sorry,
74.
144,721 was the last number, yes.
721 was what was. put
Right,
in.
what is it now is my question, because that's what I had too.
What is it now? What is that question?
Well,
if
Becky
we take
said,
out
you know,
those-
Becky's got a new budget, she's made some
No,
Oh, I
changes
the
to it.
budget hasn't changed. We're
At all.
looking.
Not at all. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's-
So if we
Yeah,
have
that's-
if we have 144,721 and we take out 40,000 in repairs, 30,000 for out of system, I'm sorry, out of district, now it goes down to 74,721. And so if we say 80,000,
Can I also ask though, before you, does the expense budget that we looked at, did it include the $12,000 that Steve initially had in his operating
Yes.
budget for
Yeah.
Yes.
repairs?
so we
So
can
we should
subtract
take out
that.
that 12,000. Yeah.
And is he
Oh.
gonna need that in future budgets?
Well,
Uh,
not if it's funded through capital. So that's why, remember Bob brought up that idea that when they,
Okay.
you had discussion
We're
with
gonna
Steve.
treat it as a capital project. Yeah.
Great, so this is a new concept. Okay, great. So
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
lowers the number to
minus
6.
12.
I think there's 28,000 in the budget.
Oh, no, that's permanent.
That's a budget.
That has to
in
be
the
there.
bu-
That's in
right,
there, but he
that's-
did ask for that to increase to 40.
Yeah.
And
so
for the
12,000
purpose
Do that
of the
now.
road reconstruction.
Right,
So Becky's gonna decrease the budget by $12,000 on that line.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so that brings us
Guys
to
are serious about
62,721.
Right, just one thing about that particular issue and some of these other things we're doing. We brought these up as ways to possibly reduce the pressure on the budget. But there's another issue, which is, what are we doing here? Like, if this is it's gonna be a continuing expense, which the way Steve described it, He
Right.
said he could do
It's
a
better.
portion of the road, a portion of one road this year with that additional fund, because he said the base had been getting destroyed or disturbed or worn out over time due to dressing and grading. There's gonna be a continual need for this money, so should we set it up as a capital expense every year while he's doing this work? Are we gonna, are we just
Or
tossing
should we use it into the
tossing
budget?
numbers around here, or because this is gonna probably be something he's gonna be after next year, according to what I understand.
And the year
And-
after that.
And with the school, you know, with the, as you were pointing out, George, maybe we could take the special needs transportation or other costs out of district and take it out of reserves. Well, I don't know what the exact circumstances are, but I'm just guessing that this expense is going to be repeated next year too.
Yep.
So we, you know, we're messing around with some stuff that's a little bit sketchy, you know, conceptual wise. You know, I want the budget to be. I don't want the taxes to increase for the taxpayers 6.5% or 6.2%. I think I brought up earlier, we could also try to exercise some restraint on departments and say you can only have so much this year. I think that's a reasonable option. I think that I'm not saying we are not being collaborative with the school or with other departments when we do that, but you know, I mean, this happens to everybody. Everybody sometimes has to be told, you know, I'm going to reduce my expenditures because I've got budgetary pressures, and there's no different, you know, for us in the town. I don't think it's not being uncollaborative to address this problem in part that way. We're trying to find a way to do it, but that's one of the levers that we have.
All right, Susie?
I want to remind people that the school is negotiating the teacher contract, so we don't know where that budget's totally settling. I think if we pick a number like either 75 or 80, whatever else changes, they might have more elasticity to meet that. And I object to the word sketchy. I'm not sure what that word means to you. It usually means intent to me. But I believe that, and this this reminds me of when I first was on the FinCom in the 80s. You're juggling Jello till the end. That doesn't mean you're doing anything duplicitous or hidden. You're trying to bring the resources to bear. I remember being very excited about the idea of solar in town as a way of funding road improvement. Well, we didn't get the solar in town yet, so we're not going to look over there. We did get one solar project, but I do believe road improvement is an essential action the town needs to take, and it'll take us a while to figure out how to fund that. But I believe it would be okay to do 12,000 out of free cash. Our free cash doesn't have a guarantee number the next year, but would 12,000 be okay for this year? I think so. And George's idea that you begin to roll it into the operating budget slowly, not do it all at once and use some free cash to help manage that ramping up. I think that those things are okay. And that is what I call sort of being as nimble as possible to meet the circumstances that we're in. And again, all these departments come to us with a lot of effort to keep things under control. And the town wants services. They approve that budget at town meeting. So I think we're trying to balance these things, and we're finding resources to do it. So again, the school budget's not totally set. I guess I'm gonna go back and say 75,000 in rural aid, and if they need to meet something, we'll be talking to them again if the contracts come out wonky.
I just want to add one quick thing. I see your hand up, George, but just also, I mean, I think we should bear in mind, right? Steve is new in his position. He did not present this to us as an annual request. I mean, we're sort of speculating that, you know, this is the first step in an ongoing process that but you know, that hasn't been presented to us, and I don't think we necessarily want to assume that that's the case at this point. So I think it's reasonable to treat the gravel road repair as you know, an FY25 capital project, and you know, we'll see what the future plans are, you know, as Steve develops plans for the town. And also, Susie, are just to clarify, are we gonna ask the school committee to consider a 75,000 or 80,000? There's been a couple numbers.
I think our group
mentioned.
needs to come to that number, and I was just trying to offer them a space to deal in their budget by
So
going to
you're
75.
sensing, you're sensing that 80 might be a little bit too alarming for them? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
Yeah, when I was talking to them originally, I've been saying, well, 65 is an increase, but look at 86. So I hope we can think about going bigger. And so to me, going from 65 to 75 is going bigger, but it's okay. Whatever it is, it's a discussion.
Mhm.
okay, George.
I like April's idea of 80,000. Yeah, I think a lot of what I wanted to talk about got covered, but you know, right now the deficit starts at 145,000. We took out 12,000 for the gravel, 40 for the roads. If we use 30 for out of district, and we can get 80,000 for the rural aid, that puts us down to $48,000 of excess levy capacity we're going to dig into. We set and create a conservative revenue estimate when we put these budgets together. Last year, we also went to the town with a proposed budget that was going to require us to use excess levy capacity. When the assessor set the tax rate, our excess levy capacity actually increased. It didn't decrease. We never used any of that money. So if we're getting this down, I think, to a pretty low number with conservative estimates on the revenue side, and I think, Becky, you were going to get more revenue estimates, I'm hoping, from the assessor's office. Maybe not, but you know, I think we're pretty close if we do these things to having a budget that isn't really going to hurt excess levy capacity next year. This year, I don't know if any other people have done it, but I've been going online and looking at what the towns are doing, and our average single tax bill went up by $36 according to the state from fiscal 23 to fiscal 24. $36 for the average home, and we've moved down the rankings again this year, and we're pretty much right in the middle of all the Commonwealth. So, you know, I think we're being very conservative in our revenue estimates, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of balancing our budget. I think we're close. If we were to do these cash things.
Bob and then Becky.
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, I'm not opposed to some of these measures that we're discussing, such as Steve's money, the 12,000 for the roads. As a matter of fact, I think I may have brought that up in the first place, but yeah, I think I'm in favor. I just wanted to point out that some of the danger of funding things that are continuing expenses I've always been told in this committee that that's not a good policy, and so we should look at that long term and make sure that we're not you know, going too far with that, because it could get us into trouble somewhere down the road. But you know, and also I just want to make a point again that we are the finance committee, represent the taxpayer. You know, we all have to remember that the taxes are a regressive tax, that they hit the hardest on the most vulnerable members of our community, that people that have good money and good jobs are paying a very small portion comparatively of their income to property taxes. And so we have an obligation to bear that in mind when we draw up our budgets. And so I'm glad we're hacking this so-called excess levy capacity down, because that's going to mean a lower increase in our levy, which ultimately is converted into a tax bill down the road. And that's my concern. That's what I'm trying to accomplish here.
All right, Becky.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we don't have the House numbers. We don't have the Senate numbers yet. We don't know, but they haven't signaled that they'll go in much of a better direction, but they could. So the hard part is with our earlier date this year, April 27th, we're gonna have to guess. We'll only see the house numbers. Hopefully we'll see them, by the end of the month. And that can kind of help us solidify our revenue picture better.
Thanks. Okay, Susie.
I just want to ask if the state revenue improves, because we don't know why it's particularly down, how does that affect? That could also affect what budget gets passed. It sometimes doesn't get passed until July or August, or, I mean, August or
Doesn't
September.
come out
Well,
of
after town
conference
meeting.
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
earliest.
so,
But it's the final numbers that go into the recap sheet, so it's just,
Well, and
that's the
one of the
hard
reasons.
part.
Right, and it's one of the reasons why things end up being better, because we use conservative numbers in our estimates.
All right.
We-
All right, so we made I think some good progress tonight. We've got a number of operating budget items that at least I've seemed like we have some consensus ought to be funded through cash reserves rather than tax levy. I didn't hear any objections. I know, Bob, you gave us, kind of a good sort of warning about making a habit of this, but I think we should, I think we should, at our next meeting, we should kind of do a couple things. One is presumably, Becky, you'll have, I'm
Yeah,
sure
I'll
there'll be
have that all
some
to you.
changes,
Yeah.
so you'll have a new budget for us to look at.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share George's CapEx funding spreadsheet with committee members, and we'll make some decisions about how to fund these capital items that were discussed tonight. Presumably, Susie, you'll have an update from us from the school committee about whether they're, amenable to that suggestion we just discussed tonight. And I think there'll be an opportunity to also, to get feedback from committee members on any other budget lines that are in this latest version of the budget that we'll see. Susie, see your hand up?
a couple things. One, I didn't see a document from capital planning. I didn't look in the Google Docs, but I don't know if it got written up. So especially for my notes, it would be helpful to see the capital plan proposal. And then
Right.
the school, I believe, will be meeting on the 21st of March. We will be meeting on the 19th. So I can certainly put the idea out there, tell them what discussion we're having and what the rationales are. But I don't believe the school committee will have a way to meet before our next meeting.
Understood.
Susie, I can send you a copy of our minutes, which have all those numbers on them. Is that okay, AJ? Send it to the
Yeah,
committee.
Yes,
although, yeah, I think that would be good to do. But I'm also going to share this document that we're looking at here, which
Yeah.
will be familiar to all. This is George's, capital project funding analysis sheet that we use, and you'll see these highlighted items are the new proposed capital items. And we'll have to add a line on here for the various decisions that we've at least started to make about, operating budget items that we're proposing to fund. With
Yeah,
reserves.
AJ, I would just
So-
recommend if you do that, to do it under line 20, so we can keep the CapEx stuff separate from the operating.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna share several documents that that, if it's okay with you, George, that you, have sort of
Sure.
prepared in advance. So just to give you, some context for what they are, I'm gonna show them up on the
AJ, one
screen now.
thing,
Yeah, please.
just before you leave this schedule,
Yeah.
it would be helpful in column C where you have the dollar amounts to put it, well, for the cruiser, put in the 7588. But I was also going to say for the body cameras, and
Yep,
you should probably put in 24,000, and then in the other column, put in 12,000.
all right, because of the grant, yeah.
And,
I
and
see
then
what you're
write it in column I, you can write, you don't have to do it now even, yeah. And then just write 50% grant funded in column
Yeah.
I. And then the same thing for the elementary school, put the 100 in, I got the number for you.
Yeah.
At the 137.
76, yeah.
So 137,
600,
600?
yes,
A four, okay, yeah, okay.
right. And then you can put a comment in, it's leftover school roof funds. Something.
Earmark, yeah.
Yeah, that's more helpful. And just so everybody knows, column H is the amount of all those items in yellow that haven't been funded yet. So those are the amounts that we're going to be trying to fund, is the total of that column. And as we put those into free cash, capital stabilization, those will go to zero. Thank you.
All right, thanks, George. Okay, so let me show you a couple other things that George put together that I think will be of interest to the committee. Let's see.
AJ, if we're going to go over the OPEB, can I present that one?
Yeah, of course. So I think George alluded to some data he's been able to capture on average tax bill. And so there's a spreadsheet that I think people will want to see and potentially play around with. So that's what this document is. And this will be one of the things I share as a follow-up to this meeting as well. You can see kind of our 4 towns are highlighted in this purple color here, and here's Shutesbury, line 181. And this is right now sorted by the average single family tax bill. Okay, so that's another document. All right, and then I'm gonna pull up the OPEB funding analysis document, and George, if you wanna.
Well, I was thinking I made a change to it.
Oh, please, then go ahead and do that.
I don't know how in depth you want to be with it, but I made a change to it.
Yeah, so why don't you pull it up on your end and then give us any
Okay.
context.
So here it is, and we've all seen it before. Let me get to the top. This is our current balance in the OPEB fund, and so if we fund another 50,000 in the operating budget, these two items combined, the interest income on those would be 55,000. So the end of fiscal 25, call it June 30th of 25, we would have a balance of that. And then that carries over and the process continues. Add another 50, earn interest. And that's the assumption that's currently set in this budget, and it continues to increase. And then just for illustration purposes, I estimated we start drawing funds using this fund to fund part of the OPEB costs in the operating budget. I'm using 2030. And so what happens is you can see now there's a negative. It doesn't look negative, but this is being subtracted out. So 29, we had this amount, we add these two amounts, we end up with this. 30, we take this, we add these two amounts, but we subtract this. Our balance isn't going up quite as high as it used to. So that's how it works. These numbers here, the OPEB costs, are from the actuarial tables, in the report provided to us by those professionals. So it's the best number we can use for our estimate of what our OPEB costs will be year over year. So funding it for 100% doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's what I put in. And when we do that, we deplete in 2044. Right there, we end up, the fund goes to zero. If we change it to 50%, then you'll see that 50% of this number is being subtracted. And now we're good to 2062. We're good for another 30 years. Pretty much how it works. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is because I made a different version. I realized that using 50% across the board, and also if we started funding it next year, just to show, you'll see that these OPEB costs change. So when they start is based on what you put in here. So just understand that when you're doing your analysis, you can put that in. And then to what extent you put in a percentage, it'll subtract, it'll make a move here. So it'll be reflected there, excuse me. So again, at 100%, we run out in 2044. So I decided that, you know, we should use varying rates across the future years. So what I did was I made a slightly different version, and this version, I've got the same assumptions as before. I'm putting in for each year, how much is taken out of the fund is based on the percentage in this column. So I used 100%. I use 2030, I get the same 2044. Then what I did was I said, well, what if we wanted to keep, just so everybody knows, this is also an addition I made. And what this is, the total budget cost. So this year, our OPEB budget cost, according to the actuaries, we're going to be paying 107 out of our budget. If we fund it with, if we also fund the OPEB fund with 50, what we're really hitting our budget for is 157. And so that just, this number is just calculating this plus what we know is going to be in our operating budget based on the tables from the actuary. And you'll notice that this, so we can kind of see how this grows year over year. Now it goes to 50, and that's because we decided, because the assumption here is that in 2030, 100% of the OPEB is going to come out of the OPEB fund. So the only thing that's getting paid for out of the operating budget is the 50,000 that we put into the OPEB fund. And that's why this goes to 50. So that the assumptions that you're currently seeing don't make sense. So what I did was I created a different funding scheme where we use a different percentage each year. And you can change this at will. I'm going to highlight this in green. So this is an entry. Just so you all know, this is an entry cell. So you can make changes to this cell and watch how it changes these numbers. Now notice I started 10% in 2030. So 10% of this is that number. And the reason I use that was because you'll see this percentage is the increase in the total budget year over year. And you can see that they're relatively subtle increases, more in line with the types of increases we see in places. And so if we were to assume that we would be increasing gradually over the years, the amount of funds that we're going to use from OPEB fund to fund the actual OPEB costs, because you can see in these later years how crazy the numbers are, we're going to have to increase that. But I just threw these in here to kind of get a reasonable increase year over year. And when we do that, I get us out to 2061. So, you know, this is all estimates. This is not going to be precise, but it's going to give us a sense of what different funding methods will do in terms of our sustainability of funding the OPEB fund and how that'll sustain our operating budget. So when you get this, just be aware you have this simple calculation here. The only places you need to make changes are in green. Do we stop funding this in the future? You can just send them, or do we want to use bigger numbers? Talking to John, and I did, they've been gradually increasing their number every year since they've started. They're putting in $220,000 next year. They're proposing. So they're increasing it. So you could do that. You could also say, what if we injected 100,000 and that would change this? I'm sorry, 10,000. And again, you can play with these. Those are the only things you really need to play with to see how long the fund lasts, and the effect is. On this one, same exact variables, except this one you don't want to change. And I'll send this to everybody because I assume, AJ, you were going to send it out. So I'll send what you see here to everybody. And again, only what's in green are the things you really want to mess with when you're doing your analysis. And that's pretty
Great.
much it, unless there's questions.
Bob and then Susie.
You're on mute.
Bob, I think.
Yeah, there's an idea that we didn't discuss earlier, but if we funded our contribution to OPEB this year out of cash reserves instead of out of the budget for this year only, we could hack down that number of the levy capacity reserve to nothing. And that might be something that we want to look at. I would certainly think that'd be a great idea to get it to 2.5% increase in levy rather than having that excess levy capacity used. But there's another place we could do it conceivably, certainly, with by funding that line, which we have done in the past from cash.
Susie?
Are our investment earnings changing with the kind of market we're in, or is that just is that a fixed percent number in that column?
It's a very conservative number, but it is the number that the actuaries use in their report. So that's what I'm tying it to. If the treasurer can tell us something different, we could certainly change the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
And you can change the interest rate. It's not highlighted in green, but if I change it to 10%, you can see the interest cost is much higher. And you can also see that it goes to perpetuity. We're funding all the way by going to 10%. So, you know, well, that's assuming my funding assumptions there. On this one, if you change it to 10%, oh, excuse me. Let me try that again. I just want to put that back in. Just by changing the interest rate, we added a number of years to the depletion.
And then I'm kind of confused by Bob thinking that if we fund that 50,000 out of free cash this year, but we're pretty committed to continuing to fund OPEB. So doing it out of free cash seems like a misstep.
Bob?
My idea is that this is a perfectly good way to take the pressure off the budget by funding it from a different source this year. I'm not at all opposed to us continuing to fund it for 50,000 in this calendar year, but I think that we don't necessarily have to fund it from the levy this year. That was my point. Just like the other items that we discussed, some of them are going to be repeating expenses going forward, but we're funding them this way because we find it the most prudent thing to do this year because of the pressures on the budget this year. So just an idea, just another thing that could be done. Not saying that I would support it. I think I certainly would, but it's certainly something we could do. I'm not proposing, Susie, in case you misunderstood me, that we don't fund OPEB now or in the future.
Okay. All right. George, thanks for a ton of work that you've done on a number of different really important tools for
You're welcome. I just want to make sure we have good information.
So I'll send two of the documents that I showed tomorrow after making those couple changes that we discussed, and then you can send me the OPEB planning.
Will do.
tool.
Yep.
Okay. I know it's 8:37. Would folks be willing to just at least dispense with, we've got a couple of minutes that we didn't get to tonight. Do we have the energy
AJ?
to? Yep.
I I'm not sure we finished the budget conversation. There was one very important point we didn't talk about.
Sure.
And that's the debt service portion of the budget was never settled. And I
Right.
was just wondering if we could ask Becky if she had updated information on how the debt service is going to affect it. You're on mute.
Ryan has sent it off to bond council and we're working to compile it. It's not complete yet. I'll have that in the next update.
Okay, thank you.
It's a very important piece.
Susie?
Do I have a number I'm talking to the school committee with?
I think April liked the 80,000. I think I like that number too. I know that was a little bit more than you were initially comfortable with, but
That's okay. That's not the
work
goal.
for you.
So George is nodding, Jim waved. Are we, so I should talk to them about 80.
Yeah.
That's a nod.
Yep, I hear it.
And then one thing about the tax, average single family tax schedule is, there's still 5 towns that haven't reported. So at the very bottom, they're blank. So it could slightly change. That's not a completed schedule worksheet from that perspective. There's a couple other pages on it. There's a lot of tabs on it. I would tell everybody the second to the last tab has the graph that shows our average single tax rate, Amherst, Leverett's, and Pelham's, and you can see how we all look relative to each other. I think you're all going to find to be very interesting. And that's it.
Okay. All right, sounds good. So, so Becky, you'll, oh, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
As we're getting ready to close, I just wanted to address Bob's comments about the building committee just quickly. Because was struggling to understand his comments and I hope to talk to him a little bit about it. But the only female on the building committee is Anna Cook, and she's the owner of a local construction company. So I'm not sure how the comments, what comments were made, but I just wanted to clarify that she's a fellow person involved in construction, and she, so I'll review the tape and find out what was said, but I'm sorry that you were upset by it, Bob, and hopefully we can resolve this issue.
Okay. All right, so do folks feel up to talking about minutes, or should we push that to next? All right. My screen is freezing all of a sudden, so I'm gonna assume that everybody's comfortable with this. Let's see. I will share I think we've got 2 minutes to discuss the February 20th. We never sorry, February 26th. I'm sorry, February 6th is the minutes that we discussed but didn't vote on. So let me pull those up. Sorry. Okay. So we discussed these minutes at our last meeting. There was, I believe, we wanted to.
That's the old ones, not the revised ones.
Okay, let's see. Did you emailed us revised minutes from that?
Oh, yeah, I revised them on 2/20/24.
Pull those up then.
I could find my, where do you go? Did everybody receive the revised ones? I looked tonight to check if I sent them out, and I see that, but I didn't write down when I sent that email. Exit full screen, go to over here, go to back here.
I don't recall seeing them, Susie. I don't think I got them.
I'm
I
looking.
don't think I
The let's see. 6. Oh, come on. Oh, for God's sakes, maybe you didn't get them. Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to
Yeah, it
pull
looks
them
like
up from your.
I didn't send you the revised one. God.
Whoops.
Well,
Block
I'll
the
tell you what,
recording.
you want to send, you want to send those after tonight's meeting and we'll just,
Yep,
we'll
yep,
just.
yep.
we'll
Sorry,
vote on
sorry,
that.
sorry.
No problem. All right, so, so I'm gonna just pull up the February 20th minutes then. Okay. All right, I looked at these earlier today, I didn't have any comments. Does anybody have questions or comments for Susie on the February 20th minutes?
Yeah, minor thing on C under preliminary
Yep,
FY budget. The 156 in A is, I think it's missing a K,
150.
$156 versus
Oh, yeah.
156,000.
Yep.
And then in 4.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure it reads properly because it says the funding level without FY's use of free cash reflects an increase of 5,000 over previous year.
Which line are you on?
I'm sorry, yeah, 4 under C. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's A. And it says it reflects an increase of 5,000 over the previous year, but I think it actually would reflect a decrease of 5,000 because we had 40, 15 was funded from cash, so we're going from 25 to 20. So I think that should be a decrease. Is effectively a decrease. Or, reflects is fine. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Am
so
I right?
in the so why did I think it was 25?
2 years ago, it was 15.
Yep.
Then we went to 40, but without free cash, we really went to 25. And now we're coming down to 20. So we're 5,000 more than it used to be historically. We're 5,000 less than the operating budget portion or the tax levy portion of last year's.
Okay, did we didn't, I don't have my paper notes. Okay, I'll write that in here, but I want to see, maybe
I
I
think it was
thought it was going to be put down as 25 in the long run, but I probably am wrong, so I'll say a decrease.
Well, yeah, I mean, based on what it's saying, the funding level without FY's use of 15,000 would be a decrease, but
Yeah.
check it out. That's fine.
Yeah, right.
And then one other minor thing is back to the top when Steve was talking about number 2 under B. The very last thing says at Fisk Pond, culvert at Fisk Pond, but Fisk Pond's in Wendell. I think he's talking about the inlet into Lake Wyola, right?
Right, where Fisk Pond, the stream from Fisk Pond comes into, it's right past the state park where it flows in.
Yeah, I understand that comes from Fisk Pond, but I'm just wondering, he's talking about the culvert that goes under Lakeview Road, right?
So what line is that?
Number 2, line
A.
A, under the highway department and B.
Okay, so I should say at the inlet from Fix Pond,
Yep,
Sounds good.
inlet from.
It just
Fisk
sounded
Pond,
funny
okay.
to me that we're naming a property that's not in our town.
Okay,
I think Fisk has an E at the end.
oh,
Yes.
okay. All right.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the February 20th minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay,
George, you want to start the voting?
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves at.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, aye.
Okay, great. All right, So we didn't do any like committee updates. I think unless there's something urgent, I think I would recommend we wrap up for tonight. Is there anything urgent that any members needed to share?
I just want to ask, we have a meeting in 2 weeks from yesterday. Is that our next meeting?
Yeah, so our next
like-
meeting,
Yeah, 19th.
Okay, 19th.
And
Okay.
Aaron Saunders will be at the town hall on Monday from 10:30 to 11:30 for anybody that wants to be entertained.
The 11th,
Yep.
10:45, 10:30, you said.
okay, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
We did it.
Second.
Okay, I'm tired.
Yeah, me too.
All right, quick vote, George,
Organize, I.
Was I?
Emery, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
And Stein, aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody. for
Nice
hanging
job,
out.
AJ. Good night, everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah.
AJ.
Yeah.
Too.
Night,
All
everyone.
right. Night.